Hey guys, sorry for that slight delay on getting everything started. For some god's forsaken reason, my computer decided to not respond to me clicking the intro button so that you guys could actually hear the intro for the channel. So those of you watching this on the playback are probably going to see about 10 seconds of near silence, which is confusing, but here we are. Welcome everybody to the Stoicism wine rant. This was requested when I did the Platonism one. You guys kind of wanted to hear me talk a little bit about Stoicism, and don't worry, I have wine in front of me and a lot to freaking say that makes me just as angry about some of the modern ways that people have screwed with the ancient Stoic philosophy. Not modern Stoics TM, but the way that especially hustle culture has seriously messed with the core of what at least my experience with Stoicism is. I passed Calon along the Internet Classics Archives translation of the Enchiridion. I've got some issues with it in a few places, and I'll make those clear, but if you guys want to do kind of a Platonism 101 thing at the beginning, like we did with, or Stoicism 101 thing, like we did with the Platonism.
I thought we already covered
stream,
that.
Then if we do a Stoicism 101 thing like we did with the Platonism stream, then we can do that. So how is everybody doing tonight? I am seeing quite a few people in the live chat, which is always exciting. There's 24 of you guys hanging out here, so that's really cool. I'm seeing a couple of you, like there's at least one person that I'm seeing knitting. Kyla's Discope says that they want to knit. For some reason, my chat is not fully working on the Streamyard end, and I'm not really sure why that is, so that's a little bit confusing.
You remember to sacrifice to the tech gremlins, right?
Yeah, I did. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I can try refreshing it to see if it fixes it, but that'll duck me out for like a half a second.
Maybe you didn't offer enough blood?
Never make blood offerings on a Hellenic altar. You and I both know this.
Well, look, I don't know if you worship... Look, the tech gremlins for me usually take cis blood, okay?
But I'm not cis. There.
Right, so that's why you steal it from your partners. Wow.
All right, give me a second. I'm going to try refreshing really fast. I will be back in like 2 seconds. Let's see if I can try to get the chat to work, because I want to be able to pop y'all's comments up.
Commentari. Hi, everyone. This is now my show. I have officially dethroned Allie. And
nope, the Streamyard chat still doesn't seem to be picking up the comments. That is really confusing. I have no idea why this is. I've never had this problem. All right, I guess I'm going to have to like read your guys' comments off of YouTube, and I cannot pop them up on the screen, which is going to be a little bit obnoxious for an interactive stream, but I do have 2 screens, and that's part of the reason why. Maybe I wonder if YouTube chat's having a problem of some kind, because like I'm also not seeing a lot of response. Oh, we've got a super chat from Ikeda Hakubi. Use the rusty electrified spork to feed your spam email to the tech gremlins. That might work.
Nah, they generally only tend to take cis blood.
Oh, that's so weird. Okay, so when I'm in the top chat, I can see more than in the live chat. I don't know what the hell is going on with YouTube chat tonight. Like, that is really confusing. So I guess I'm going to do my best to see if chat keeps populating, because it's like, I've seen somebody, Variant says chat is not populating. Gainer says chat seems slow here. Apparently one person is still in the Hellenism Discord. We got 40 people. I am sorry, guys, that YouTube seems to be having some tech problems. If you guys are a member of my Discord server, if chat continues to have tech problems, then if you're in the general VC text chat, I will read out of that as well if the chat keeps not populating. So post in not gen chat, not general chat, but general VC text under the Stoa if you are in my server. I will respond to you guys from there if you are in my server and already through the gatehouse, and I will do my best. For those of you that are stuck in Xenos, I will try to respond in Xenos to you as well, but I'm going to mainly be responding to general VC text. So if you guys are in the live chat and you have Discord open, you guys can post in general VC text and I will try to respond to you. But let's start here and hope that YouTube gets their shiz together sometime over the course of the stream, because there's 40 of y'all and I would like to interact with you. That's part of the point of these rants, right? So I want to be able to talk to you guys.
Yeah, and that way, yeah. I mean, all I hear is bar, 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 but still.
Yeah, we are not speaking in Greek currently. So for addressing our last the Platonism wine rant, interestingly, Edward Butler, whose work I actually referenced in a positive light, mind you, I'm going to preface that, in the Platonism wine rant, actually responded to some of our commentary. He agreed with some of the things I said, particularly about the good, but he disagreed about Platonism reclassifying gods. And my problem is that Platonists do that quite a lot. He might not see that as a part of Platonism, and some of the writers may have disagreed, but modern Platonists frequently do this, even outside of Christian Platonists. So my response to his criticism is effectively, I stand my ground on the criticisms that I leveled because that is how I've seen Platonism applied, but I'm glad to know that his particular brand of Platonism doesn't do that. That seems fair.
Yep, the gods are not Utuku. Oh wait, that's right, this isn't a Sumerian or Akkadian stream. Whoops, my bad.
So coming back to Stoicism, because that's what you guys are here for, right? Stoicism kind of got a bad rep, which sucks because it's actually a really wonderful philosophy if you learn about it.
Right, so what's a Stoic? Can I eat it?
So a Stoic is somebody who attempts their best to practice the basic principles of Stoicism. Now, the problem with Stoicism, much like Platonism, is, well, which one are you talking about? Are you talking about the early Stoics? Are you talking about the later Stoics? Are you talking about the Roman Stoics? Or
definitely
are you...
Marcus Aurelius. I know you love him to death.
Oh my gods. So I don't hate Marcus Aurelius. However, I do not think he is the best resource for a new Stoic. I actually tend to lean towards the Enchiridion, which... I'm going to put that in the description after this video is over because the live chat is not populating properly, but I am going to do my best to see if it'll at least go in. Like, if I try to put it in there. Like, I don't really know what to do. Because, again, like, freaking YouTube chat is not populating properly. Nope. It looks like it might be populating now. I refreshed and top chat and live chat, like, if I go back to top chat, I can see some things if I refresh, but it's not populating by itself. I have to refresh it in order to see anything new. Chat is 10 minutes behind. Testing. Respond when you see this variance. Please do the 101, assuming that I know nothing about Stoicism. Test scene. Thanks, YouTube.
Stoicism is not something you can eat, apparently.
Okay, yeah. So I am seeing your guys' text, but if you want to see me respond more quickly, if you are in my server, I'm paying attention to the general VC text on my other screen as well. Post anything there. I will respond to you there if it's something worthwhile to respond to, but it doesn't appear to be naturally populating without me just like hitting the refresh button over and over. And it also doesn't seem to be saving anything in the chat. Like, there's a lot of chat that clearly there's losing context somewhere in there, and I don't really know what's going on. YouTube seems to be having some serious tech issues on their end because it's not happening, like things not populating on StreamYard's end either, and normally I have a chat in StreamYard. So let's start with Stoicism 101. The most important base principle of Stoicism, and I'm sure that any of you who have ever gotten advice from me on a personal matter will have heard me say some variation on this. But that is that there are things that are within your control and things that are not within your control.
Everything's in my control. What are you talking about, Allie?
So
I'll make the sun disappear.
The things that are in your control include basically your thoughts. Your actions to a significantly lesser extent, but as Epictetus points out in the Enchiridion, and as Marcus Aurelius also points out, you can be in a position where your physical body is, say, restrained or sickened to the point where you cannot control your actions. Like people who develop advanced epilepsy, you go into a seizure, you can't control that your body's in a seizure, right? Like you can take your medications and do your best to prevent those seizures. But like if you're having a seizure, you are not in control of your actions at that point. Your body is doing things and you have no control over it. So basically, your thoughts are the only thing that you have control over. And even then, I put caveats on my own personal stoicism that there are brain chemical imbalances and information access problems that can make it so that you don't realize the level of control you have over your thoughts, or so that you don't have as much control over your thoughts as somebody else might. For example, people who have anxiety, most of us have a genetic predisposition to anxiety. So a lot of us have, say, overactive nervous systems.
Me? Never.
So for those of us who have overactive nervous systems, you might have a panic attack over literally nothing at all. Like, you don't even have thoughts and your body just does that. And again, that's the whole mind-body distinction. And where do you draw the line exactly? If you've got, like, Kane in the Gen VC text points out intrusive thoughts and OCD. Those are a perfect example of you might not even have full control over your thoughts. Now, you might learn, in addition to potentially taking medication, because, like, I have several friends with OCD who do, you might learn techniques, many of which are actually based on Stoicism. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is based on Stoicism. You might learn techniques to identify those intrusive thoughts and choose whether or not to respond to them. But you also might have a particular pattern or ritual or things that you cannot feel physically comfortable without because of that disorder. And so, again, there's a gray zone here. And a lot of people forget that when you are dealing with Stoicism. There's also, again, a major problem, and I'll get to it down the line when I start to explain some of this, with hustle culture having hijacked a lot of these principles, because these principles are meant here to give you a measure of peace. One of the core tenets of a lot of ancient philosophy was kind of to reduce the role that luck plays in the pursuit of eudaimonia, or like satisfaction that goes beyond just basic happiness. And when you're talking about the Stoics looked inward to the mind primarily for this. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to post the link to, again, somewhat contentious translation of the Enchiridion that I'm using here. It's in the live chat for anybody watching on the playback. It will be in the description of the video when I'm done with the video and can change the description. And I'm putting it in the general VC text for those of you that are on my server, and I will also drop it in the Xenos text, even though people that are having a conversation there might be a little bit confusing. So, coming back to basic tenets, you kind of get that at the opening of the Enchiridion here. Some things are in our control and others are not. Things in our control are our opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own actions, which I take issue with that translation. Most translations use whatever are our own thoughts, and because there's later parts where he talks about your body not being fully in your control. Things that are not our control are our body, property, reputation, command, in one word, whatever are not our own actions.
Property shouldn't be in control because property shouldn't exist.
But I mean, things that is also not in our control, right? Like our property, whether or not my house burns down is not fully within my control. Now, I can do a thing to try to light it on fire if I want it to burn down. But like, if some arsonist decides to throw a Molotov through my window, I can do everything in my power to attempt to stop that fire, but I can't stop them from lobbing the Molotov through my window in the first place, because that's not my actions. That's not my thoughts. That's not within my control. And a lot of people, when they first hear that, they think, well, duh.
Well, I mean, you could just I don't know, shoot the person before he throws the Molotov or something.
Looks like, we've got another super chat. I don't know if chat is populating now. I did refresh it, and I was able to see. Variance the Electric throws coinage, is indefinitely tired and requests much information. Have a good stream, y'all. I'm afraid I don't have much spare change this month. Well, thank you, Variance. You've been extremely generous in the past. Like, I don't demand anything from any of my fans, from any of you guys. I'm grateful that you are here. Being physically present to listen to me ramble means a fuck of a lot to me. If you don't have all that much to support, you don't need to. Like, don't spend money on me that you need.
Hey, Allie, what's money? I'm confused. Is that something you're supposed to have?
Yeah, unfortunately. We do live in a society, Calon, as much as it's a meme.
No, I refuse. I'm going to go into the mountains now and just leave it all.
Well, it looked like the chat started populating for a second, and now it's gone. Damn it.
I have control over whether I live in a society or not.
So, coming back to the idea, a lot of people initially think, okay, well, this is obvious, right? Well, I know that I don't control what other people do. But do you actually believe that? Because believing and knowing are two different things. And one of the core principles of Stoicism, when you're dealing with this idea of what you do and do not know, or even what you can and cannot influence, let's do an actual example here. Calon, are you up for kind of like a speculative example? You there, Calon? Uh-oh, Calon's AFK. So let's speak. I will mute Calon until Calon gets back. Calon can unmute herself when she gets back, but there's just background noise. So let's say, you know, you're dating a significant other, and your significant other is not doing the dishes, right? Like, they're just not doing the dishes. It's their job. You've agreed to this. They never get them done. Like, you ask them, they say they will, and then they don't, and you end up getting stuck doing the dishes, and you are so freaking frustrated by this, right? So what do? Well, you yourself are in control of how you feel about that, right? Like, you're in control of the narrative you tell yourself about your partner not doing the dishes. If you believe that your partner is, say, lazy, you're going to feel very different than if you believe that your partner hasn't been doing the dishes because maybe they're stressed and tired and just haven't had the energy. And how you think about that is going to change how you feel about it, right? Our thoughts, to some degree, create our emotions. Now, some of our passions, some of our emotions are generated by a direct response. Like, if somebody hits you in the knee, you're probably going to feel pain, right? But whether or not you get angry at that person depends on whether or not you think they did it on purpose, for example, or what you think their intention was. If your doctor is thunking you on the knee with a rubber mallet and it hurts a little bit, you know that they're doing a reflex test. You're going to feel differently about that than if some random person just comes and whacks you across the knee with a baseball bat in the middle of the street and you've never met them before, right? Like, these contextual things matter. So you're mad at your significant other, and because, like, let's say that your current narrative is, well, they don't want to do the dishes, so they're not doing them. Well, when you talk about things like your opinion being in control, desire, aversion, etc., one of the things that a lot of people would attempt to do in this situation, that's rather unhealthy for a relationship, might I add, and I am not at all endorsing this, is they might get into a yelling match with their partner. They might try to guilt trip their partner into doing the dishes. They might argue with their partner. They might yell at each other. There's an incredibly unhealthy dynamic that might happen there. And what that stems from is a lack of belief in the fact that you cannot control your partner's actions. That is you attempting to force your partner to do those dishes come hell or high water. And those manipulation tactics are things that all of us do. Like, obviously not to that extreme, but all of us do them to some degree or another to each other. Now, that doesn't mean that any attempt to convince somebody is fruitless and you should never do it according to Stoic principle. That's not at all what I'm saying here. But what I'm saying is that if you did get into that fight with your partner because they weren't doing the dishes and tried to force them after initially not necessarily getting the most positive with talking to them calmly, then that is a lack of belief that your partner's actions are not in your control. To some degree, even if it's subconscious, that is what that indicates. So right here, even though this first principle here, some things are in our control and others are not, things that are in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own actions. Even though that seems so very simple, it's not, because most of us, by definition, do not believe it. Another thing, example of not believing that, Calon, how upset would you be if you lost one of your books? Like, if somebody just, like, took it from you and burned it?
Sorry, someone did that, and their skull is now displayed on my lawns. What were you saying?
Well, my point being, though, is that, like, you know, some of us, for example, are terrified that somebody might come and, like, burn our books or take things from us, right? That's another one of those things where if you're scared of that, if you're worried about it, there's some degree of your belief that that is somehow in your control.
Yeah, right.
Now, again, some of us have anxiety. Being a Stoic doesn't magically make it go away. I still have anxiety. Like, I deal with it. Calon gets to hear about it constantly. Oh, look, it's working now. The Streamyard Chat at least is working. JB Bell, also very happy to hear the discussion on Stoicism and mental health. Comes up a lot in the Stoic Discord I'm in. Thank you so much, JB. And Child of Nyx, I have arrived for the learning. Does this mean that this YouTube chat is populating now?
No, wait. People actually want to watch me? And what?
Does this mean that YouTube chat is populating now? It might not. No, well, it's still glitching out if I try to click live chat, but I actually got some in the side chat, dang it. But yeah, Zalrock, clinical depression and wishing for death, that's another one of those things that you might not fully be able to control. So it looks like I got at least some chat population in the side of my StreamYard, so I'm really, really happy for that. If you guys have given me a super chat and I've missed it and you are in my Discord, tag me, like at me in my Discord, and type whatever it is that you had put in your super chat and the amount, and I will make sure that I read that off. Because again, it's not populating for me consistently, so I don't necessarily know what's going on.
Tag her even if you don't send in anything. Let's fill up our Discord notification. Sorry, what?
But coming back to kind of mental health stuff, again, I'm caveating all of this as we understand more now scientifically about how the brain works than we did back then. So Heracles asks, is this where the idea that Stoicism is about being emotionless comes from? It's something that I've heard said about Stoicism. Yes, this is part of where the idea of being emotionless comes from. It's not that you're actively trying to be emotionless. In fact, there are some emotions that are highly encouraged within Stoicism, one of them being the Stoic principle of justice, this idea of feeling strongly towards your fellow man and doing good towards your fellow man. In fact, a lot of my activism within the community actually comes from the Stoic principle of justice. But the idea that you have some degree of control over how you feel because of your narrative, one, actually has an evidence-based, psychological approach that it was based on, cognitive behavioral therapy, like I mentioned before, and two, can, even if you have some of these conditions, at the very least help take the edge off of some of them. A Stoic with anxiety is going to feel some less anxiety because at the very least we know how to cope with it differently than somebody who does not understand these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, Calon, do you want to talk about some of, you don't have to talk about anything super personal, but we've had some conversations about this in the past too, right? Like, other people's opinions of us, for example, are not things that we can control.
Yeah, and that's why I ignore them. I mean, what?
But I mean, we both run into situations where we've had to remind each other, for example, that when it looked like there was a conflict going on, as much as you can do your best to put your best foot forward in and interact with another human, you can't force them to think a certain way about you. And if somebody thinks some way about you, that doesn't necessarily make that true about you either.
Right, exactly. See, that's why I always say, it's not my fault that other people are wrong.
So the next sort of section of the Enchiridion is things in our control are by nature free, unrestrained, unhindered, but those not in our control are weak, slavish, restrained, belonging to others. Remember then that if you suppose that things which are slavish by nature are also free, and that which belongs to others is your own, then you will be hindered. You will lament, you will be disturbed, you will find fault both with gods and men. But if you suppose only to be your own that which is your own, and what belongs to others such as it really is, then no one will ever compel you or restrain you. Further, you will find fault with no one and accuse no one. You will do nothing against your will. No one will hurt you. You will have no enemies, and you will not be harmed. So that's some pretty big promises, don't you think?
Yeah, nah, I don't buy it. Nah, not buying that.
So part of where this comes from, let's kind of take this piece by piece. So things that are in control are by nature freed, unrestrained, unhindered, but those that are not in our control are weak, slavish, restrained, belonging to others. Part of what that means, so one of the things that a lot of us have had to learn the hard way, again, is that other people's opinions of us are not within our control. We can do our best to put forward the absolute best version of ourselves that we can.
Or alternatively, we can put forward the absolute worst version of ourselves and just burn the bridges before they can manifest.
But one of the things that might cause you to burn those bridges before they manifest is this mistaken belief that by doing so, you're somehow saving yourself. Oh, hey, look, another round of quick population of the chat. Akeda Hakubi, thank you so much for your super chat. Combine those promises with mythic literalism and you're asking for trouble. Yeah, so this is where we're about to get into. So on the positive side for these promises, there is truth that at the very least, with the proper attitude towards the things that are within your control and those that are not, you can at least find a great deal more peace. One of the things that, when I've had anxiety attacks, because again, my brain does things against my will. This is, you have to accept that that is the case. That's just the way it is. When I am worried about things that are not in my control, when my anxiety does things, when my brain does things, I have to accept that sometimes those thoughts, you don't have to believe everything you think. And understanding these principles in Stoicism can give me a great deal of peace, even if it doesn't necessarily prevent those thoughts from happening. And we'll get to that in a minute when we start talking about the passions. The passions are kind of your initial knee-jerk responses to things, and you can choose whether or not to keep going along with that or to try to redirect your narrative. And sometimes you might need some external help. Sometimes tapping a friend might help. Sometimes writing in a journal might help, where you kind of get all your thoughts down and realize how ridiculous you're being. But the point is that when you get overly concerned with things that are outside of your control, property, money, which, you know, as many of you who are in my Discord or follow me on Twitter know, I'm going through some financial stuff right now. That doesn't mean send me money you don't have. I'm actively discouraging people from sending me money you don't have. December is hard on everybody. Take care of yourself 100% first. But because I'm going through some financial trouble right now, I have had serious panic attacks, like actual full-blown panic attacks about that.
I know, I've been on the receiving end of them.
Yeah, you've been on the receiving end of at least 2 of them. And one of the things that I had to keep reminding myself during some of those panic attacks was that, honestly, these things are not fully within my control. I cannot control how much money my partners or I can make. I can put extra hours in. They can try to put extra hours in. We can investigate every single option and do our best to choose the absolute best, both financing option, you know, for the project that's going on outside, which thankfully it's dark, so the contractors are gone. That's part of the reason I stream late at night. But we can do that. But I cannot magically just poof money into existence, right? And worrying about it isn't going to do that either. And understanding this about what things are in our control and what are not, I can control how much I fret about it. I cannot control whether or not any of the things I'm worried about come to pass.
And just to correct something, just to show that even Allie needs help, it's usually me who has to remind her that that stuff's out of her control.
Yep, and I do the same for you when you are having yours. Like, you've had several of those episodes, and I'm not going to get into your personal stuff because, like, that's on you to share. But you and I have both done that for each other. In fact, Calon and I, you know, Calon is not a Stoic, but believes a lot of Stoic things and understands my viewpoint on a lot of things.
Wait, I do? Huh?
Yeah, you do. We've talked about that.
Oh, I guess so. Okay, I'll go with it.
But the idea being, and this is like this idea at the end, you will find fault with no one, accuse no one, you will do nothing against your will, no one will hurt you, and you will have no enemies, and you will not be harmed. So this is getting into the concept of the Stoic, capital S, sage. And the sage is a hypothetical being. There's the Stoic opinion that only Zeus is a sage because only Zeus is this perfect. But the sage is a hypothetical being that a Stoic measures themselves against that has a perfect 100% understanding of what is a want, what is a need, what is in your control, and what is not, and has made perfect peace with this.
Basically, if you've ever done virtue ethics, think of the virtuous person. In this case, this is a Stoic version of that.
Yes. So the sage is that. And part of the idea of the sage is that you compare yourself against the perfect ideal of these things without being overly critical on yourself about the gap between you and them. Because again, we're fucking human. You are going to have a panic attack if you like find out that they're going to put a lien on your house. Like, that's just a thing that's going to happen if you happen to be a human with anxiety and own a house and somebody's going to put a lien on it. Like, that's a thing that is absolutely going to provoke anxiety in a person who is prone to it. But with Stoic principles in mind, you can mitigate the effect of that anxiety. And that is what Stoicism is ultimately about. The idea being that if you apply it enough, it will become such enough of an automatic thought process that you won't have as much of an emotional response when something like that happens as you otherwise would have. But as a human, you're still always going to have those things. And that's one of the reasons that I caveated at the very beginning why I talk so much about anxiety, why I talk so much about like OCD, ADHD. I will never have, for example, one of the Stoic virtues is like diligence. I will never have perfect diligence and consistency because I have a condition that makes that impossible for me. But I can strive toward the best that I can do in accordance with my nature, which is the second principle of Stoicism.
Wait, no, you already have perfect diligence, so I'm confused. I'm just, what?
Delane from the general VC text chat, that actually is not too far off. You are not entirely wrong. It is fairly close to Buddhism in some ways. I've made that observation myself. But there's a much stronger focus on your thoughts rather than completely like there's an idea of desire for physical things, to make things preferences rather than believing that they are needs. And we'll talk about that when we get a little bit deeper.
There's also less of a focus on removing attachments as well.
Correct. Well, no, there's not. There is a focus on removing attachments to some degree.
They're more selective on their attachments.
Yeah.
Stoicism than they are in Buddhism.
Yeah, there are certain attachments that are okay within Stoicism, but like don't put more weight on an attachment than it deserves, is the idea. Don't believe that a preference is a need. And we'll get to needs and preferences because I disagree a little bit with Epictetus on some things. Again, this is part of the reason why the Stoic dialogue is ever evolving.
You're not allowed. We're mythic literalists here.
But there's no myths being told here. This is philosophical dialogue.
Okay, look, I don't care, but the Bible is true. What? Oh wait, wrong text. I'm kidding.
So, coming back to the third paragraph here, aiming therefore at such great things, remember that you must not allow yourself to be carried, even with a slight tendency, toward the attainment of lesser things. Instead, you must entirely quit some things for the present, and for the present postpone the rest. But if you would both have these great things, along with power and riches, then you will not gain even the latter, because you aim at the former too. But you would absolutely fail of the former, which by which alone happiness and freedom are attained. Work therefore to be able to say to every harsh appearance, you are but an appearance and not absolutely the thing you appear to be. And then examine it by those rules which you have, and first and chiefly by this, whether it concerns the things which are in your own control or those which are not. And if it concerns anything not in our control, be prepared to say that it is nothing to you. So this is the principle of discernment, which is extremely important. This is that ability to understand within what range of what is in your control something is. As I mentioned earlier, that whole argument with your partner example, if you get into an argument with your partner, what is in your control is what tone you take with them and your understanding of their usual patterns of, say, like response. What is in your control is what attitude you take toward them, how closely you listen to what they are saying. It is in your control whether or not you choose to escalate and yell at them, or if you try to take a more measured approach. It is in your control to approach them in the first place, or to just simmer and let your feelings go. It is within your control what attitude you take toward what you think their reasoning is, and whether or not you choose to believe them when they tell you what their reasoning is, if they choose to do so. What is not in your control is any way in which they respond. They can choose to tell you to go fuck yourself. They could choose to start yelling at you. They could choose to get up and do the dishes then and apologize. You don't know what they're going to do. And the principle of discernment is part of what tells you how to parse everything that I just explained about that situation. What is within your control, what is not within your control. And so recognizing this bit when he says, work therefore to be able to say to every harsh appearance, you are but an appearance and not absolutely the thing that you appear to be. This is a recognition of the fact that in the example with fighting with your partner over the dishes, for example, if you think your partner is lazy and you approach on that ground, and it turns out that your partner's actually been working long hours and you've somehow managed to not notice that, and that they've just been too exhausted, or say in a case that I've had with an argument of this type, one of my partners, it turned out he was suffering from clinical depression and we didn't know. That new information now changes things, right? But you have to remember that your initial impression of that event, which this is a Stoic term, is impressions. Impressions is what you first believe is true about an event. Your initial impression of an event does not necessarily correspond to the truth. I hope that makes sense for everybody.
I mean, it does. Though, some things are more evident than other things on first impressions.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is where the next kind of Stoic principle comes in, which is the application of reason. The idea is that to the Stoics, reason is a divine gift from Zeus. Like, it is, mind is the quality which we share with the gods, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard me say in voice chats and in live streams and even in videos. And under this Stoic idea, one of the things that we share also is reason, that Zeus gifted us with reason for a reason, so to speak, and that it is one of the highest virtues that one can apply. And so what you want to do is you want to take reason and apply it with any information that you get regarding, say, what's going on with your partner. And try to discover as close as you can as an individual human what the truth actually is. Right? So if that means listening to what your partner tells you and deciding whether or not you believe them, it means, like, say you find out from somebody else, it means not allowing your preconceived biases and feelings to get in the way of your pursuit of the truth. Because ultimately, the term "the truth will set you free" is quite true in Stoicism. And that's what don't let your passions, which are, again, those initial emotional feelings, that anger that you're feeling towards your partner because you think they're so freaking lazy, like, when it turns out they might actually have chronic depression and their inability to get things done is actually an executive dysfunction brought on by that. It's not letting your anger get in the way of that realization. That's what not letting your passions get away with you is.
Wait. So you mean I let my passions get away from me when I put that skull of the person who burned my books on my lawn?
Yes.
Are you sure about that? That felt like the right thing to do, though.
And, like, coming back, the next sort of section, section 2, remember that following desire promises the attainment of that which you are desirous, and aversion promises the avoiding to that which you are averse. However, he who fails to obtain the product of his desire is disappointed, and he who incurs the object of his aversion is wretched. Therefore, if then you confine your aversion to those objects only which are contrary to the natural use of your faculties, which you have in your own control, you will never incur anything to that which you are averse. But if you are averse to sickness, death, or poverty, you will be wretched. Remove aversion, then, to all things that are not in our control, and transfer it to things that are contrary to the nature of what is in our control. But for the present, totally suppress desire, for if you desire any of the things which are not in your own control, you must necessarily be disappointed, and of those things which are, in which it would be laudable to desire, nothing is yet in your possession. Use only the appropriate actions of pursuit and avoidance, and even these lightly and with gentleness and reservation. So,
seems pretty clear.
Let's unpack that a little bit.
Sounds pretty Buddhist, really.
Well, and again, this predates Buddhism last I checked.
Yeah. By a few years, probably. I mean, maybe. The founding of Buddhism is a pretty rough topic in and of itself.
Looks like I'm being told to check Xenos from time to time. I disagree about property. I think it should exist, High Flyer says. But there should obviously be regulation. Calon and I both have things about property. Again, I'm a communist of a sort. That's something that you need to know if you're watching my channel.
I'm a full-on communist.
T-Quid put up the Enchiridion, a bit where Epictetus says it may be okay if socially appropriate to show sympathy by groaning with someone, but one should take care not to groan inwardly. Carter's translation is that you shouldn't make the display that Epictetus is allowing. Yeah, I have problems with the translation that I put up, but the issue with Carter's translation is it's one of the best available directly online. Like, if you want it for free, I can recommend translations at the end of the stream if you guys would like that are better that you would have to pay for. But for free, Carter's translation is one of the better ones. I'm going to keep objecting to things as I see them. Thank you, by the way, to my mod for letting me know that things were going on in Xenos. I am going to try to respond to both, but again, I do have to go back and forth and pay attention to the live chat if it decides to actually refresh every so often. This is going to be a heck of a stream, and I'm so sorry for the tech issues, guys. This is not on my end. There's clearly something going on with YouTube, because I've never had this happen on a stream before, and I use StreamYard every time we stream. I'm going back really quick to GenVC text. It doesn't look like it's updated, so there's that. But breaking down this piece about the following desire promises the attainment of that which you are desirous. So one of the ideas behind that is, so Calon, let's say you told yourself, I'm only going to be happy if I have this book. We've all been there to some degree, those of us who love research, right?
Time to take out my axe and go for raiding.
But that also puts your happiness dependent on something outside of yourself, doesn't it? Can you control whether or not you get that book?
My axe can.
Well, you think it can, but how do you know you're going to use it on the correct person?
Well, it's just a matter of how many people I have to use it on before I get my book.
My point being, though, is you don't necessarily know even if a copy of that book is available within axing range.
I mean, potentially fair. And in which case, I guess, well, people are going to have to dig some pretty deep holes, aren't they?
My point being, though, is if you put your happiness dependent on whether or not you can axe your way to getting that book, then you might be disappointed if a copy doesn't exist in your country.
Well, there goes the country.
Well, but at that point, that doesn't necessarily... You still are not happy because you still don't have your book, and now you've got a bunch of bodies everywhere.
Yeah, it does really stink up the place. I guess it's on to the next country.
But then you're going to have to deal with your aversion to those bodies, right? They're going to stink.
I mean, yeah, that's why I moved to the next country.
So the idea here being... If you chase things, and this is where I actually have a really good segue to start shitting on hustle culture. So those of you who've been waiting for that, that's coming. Because we're getting to some of the things that I'm about to have to take issue with.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Ali, Stoicism is just about all that feel-good stuff and being like, what was it? Is that hustle culture?
There are requests from General VC Text to please keep the rating to D&D.
Huh?
I said there are requests from Gen VC Text to please keep
Look,
the
I'm
rating
also
to
a
D&D.
heathen, okay? You know.
Also, apparently you are cracking up Xenos. So yay. For those of you who are just coming into the stream, again, there's something going on with the live chat. We don't know what it is, but if you are a member of my Discord server, I'm checking both Xenos periodically, text, and I'm checking out General VC Text in my Discord, and I'm responding to people who are talking to me there because that's the only way that I can have a live chat right now with live chat broken.
Yes. You know, can one of the mods go ahead and just link your Discord in the live chat, just in case?
Well, the live chat done be broke, so if you can see it, mods are welcome to do so. The tech issues are out of my control, as Ikeda just said with a $5 super chat. Thank you. But coming back to the desire and aversion is if you shackle your happiness to whether or not you can get your book, let's even say make it specific. There's no copy of this book in your country, but you don't know that. So you shackle your happiness to axing your way through the country and getting a copy of that book. When you end your spree, you're going to be unhappy because not only are you now surrounded by bodies, but you also don't have the book. So that's something that's outside of your control, whether or not you can acquire that book. Now, you've taken what you believe are necessary steps to get that book, axing your way through the country, right? Like, your slaughter spree is the decision that you decided, I would argue with pretty faulty reasoning, but with reasoning...
How is that faulty reasoning?
Was your best steps to getting that book. But if your happiness is shackled to that, and you don't get it, now you're a slave to that desire. And you're miserable because you don't get it.
Well, good thing there's a bunch of humans to take that out on.
So here's the thing, though, is let's go ahead and put the reverse. What if you were really scared you'd never get that book, right? Because let's face it, desire and aversion are buddies. They're butt buddies. They hang out together. They do everything together. So if you really want that book and you think that that's your only happiness, then you're also going to be really scared you're not going to get it, right? Like, unless you're delusional, you understand to some degree that getting that book is not in your control, even if you're like so gung-ho about it that you're willing to axe your way through the country.
I mean, fear and desire are just two sides of the same coin.
Which is why there's so much discussion of desire and aversion within Stoicism. But
I mean,
the thing is...
I for the country because of fear or because of desire, either way, I'm still axing my way for the country.
Well, but the point being is that even if your actions are ultimately the same, that motivation, if you're axing your way through the country because you're scared you're never going to find the book, then eventually when that fear comes to fruition, you're still just as miserable, right? But you were also miserable the entire time you were axing your way through the country. Because
actually that part I was temporarily gaining some gratification from. Sorry, what?
Well, maybe. But here's the thing, like, let's go back to my example with my house problems, right? Like, I was scared to death that I could not pay for these, house editions, right? And the thing is, as I've told you a few times with your anxiety, I should have known this, but again, I'm not a perfect Stoic. I am an aspiring Stoic, as we all are, because let's face it, there are no sages except for Zeus, right? Like, this is one of those things. Socrates, according to the Stoics, was one of the closest you could possibly get, and we'll get to him later. But the best that any of us can do is compare ourselves to the sage, and I utterly fell on my face with this one. I was scared to death we wouldn't be able to pay. But at one point, did any of my worry about that actually change anything other than making me miserable?
That's a good question.
Like, granted, the reason part of that worry, where I was reasoning through all of the best actions, that was helpful, but that wasn't worry, right? That's not fear. The fear itself, the attachment to that outcome, the attachment to my home, as important as a home is, the attachment to keeping my house and the fear of losing it made me miserable. They did not in any way assist with the discussion of the options that I had for financing that. And that's this discussion here of desire and aversion and misery. If you have this desire and you shackle your happiness to your desire, I'm going to become a famous YouTuber and that's what's going to make me happy. Not only do you often have the fall on your face factor of realizing that maybe, the process is actually a lot better than the product, meaning, maybe it's the process of making videos that makes you happier than actually becoming a big YouTuber. But there's also the problem of even if you get it, if you get it, at that point, now what? Right? You're just supposed to magically be happy now that you've attained this thing?
Yes. That's totally how it works.
But that's not how humans work, is it?
How else could it work? We're brought up from birth to learn that.
Well, but clearly there's a reason why we have such an epidemic of anxiety and depression, and not all of it is genetic predisposition, right?
Yeah, another good part of it is capitalism.
So Freya says, being surrounded by bodies can be positive, e.g. if those were transphobes. I do not endorse violence on this platform, however, I'm not going to deny this.
I endorse violence in Minecraft.
So Sam wants you to clarify fear and desire are two sides of the same coin.
I mean, is there really... Fear is merely desire to avoid something. Or some sort of outcome. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, fear is basically aversion.
Yeah, that's... If I'm afraid of something, then I have a desire to not be... I have a desire either for that thing to not happen, or to avoid whatever that thing is. I mean, if you want to talk about anxiety, that I would classify as a little bit different, because anxiety isn't necessarily triggered by anything.
So coming back to section 3, and again, desire and aversion, I'm going to transition. I'm going to hit it about the hour mark. I'm going to start my rant on problems with the way that this has been co-opted. But you're probably starting to see why this might not be as compatible with hustle culture as hustle culture people would like to think.
I mean, is anything taken by the West really as people think? As compatible with the original as people think?
Coming back to this, with regard to whatever objects give you delight, are useful, or are deeply loved, remember to tell yourself of what general nature they are, beginning from the most insignificant things. If, for example, you are fond of a specific ceramic cup, remind yourself it is only ceramic cups in general of which you are fond. Then, if it breaks, you will not be disturbed. If you kiss your child or your wife, say you only kiss things which are human, and thus you will not be disturbed if either of them dies. Now, that one is a little bit heavier. Right? This is like a reminder of mortality paired with ceramic cups. But remember coming back to preferences and needs. You need food, water, arguably shelter. The Stoics disagree with that idea, but I don't. You probably need healthcare in the modern day. You don't necessarily need that ceramic cup that your significant other gave you for your anniversary that has your guys' photo on it. And so this idea of understanding that although we may be very fond of certain things, that they are not actually needs to us. I don't need this particular house. I just need shelter. I don't need this particular partner. I just might need companionship. I don't need the approval of this particular friend. I need friends.
Yeah, that's one we've been having a lot of talk about.
Mm-hmm. Remembering that the nature of individual objects, that ceramic cup that you love so much, even though it's got a lot of context and value, it's ultimately still a cup. Reminding yourself of that doesn't necessarily take the joy out of life, as some might assume, but it might give you a little more emotional stability if things get difficult. If that ceramic cup breaks and you understand that ultimately it is replaceable, even if the context is not, you'll have significantly more peace than if you put a lot of emotional weight into it.
Which, I mean, depending on your view, it's one of the more interesting aspects of Stoicism, but I think for a lot of people is going to be a bit problematic. Because things do have meaning beyond their original thing, like if your father dies and he passes on his hat to you, for example, that's going to have more sentimental meaning than necessarily Stoics say you should have.
Well, and part of the principles of Stoicism are that it gives you significantly more peace, which helps you get closer to eudaimonia, which is a general satisfaction with life. If you understand these things and do your best to separate yourself from that sentimental attachment. Like, you can appreciate it while you have it, but if that hat burns down in a house, then you can appreciate the fact that you escaped with your life without necessarily having to mourn that you have lost the hat. The memories, understanding that the memories with your father are still with you, whether you have that hat or not, that's part of Stoicism.
Yeah. It's an interesting idea.
So, this kind of brings me to a discussion of hustle culture and the way that hustle culture has tried to use Stoicism. Because, oh boy.
They were actually 100% right. There was totally no appropriation, and everything was taken within its cultural context, right? Right, Allie? Oh, I guess no.
Yeah, let's read section 4, because sections 2 and 4 just now, keep in mind, this is out of a document that we could spend several streams going through and explaining each portion, right? Like, these are just the basics. But sections 2 and 4 are the two that, like, hustle culture seems to conveniently fucking ignore when they start talking about Stoicism as a tool for hustling, which you wouldn't necessarily hustle if you are a proper Stoic. But let's get there in a second. So section 4 is, when you are going about any action, remind yourself of what nature that action is. If you are going to bathe, picture to yourself. Now, the cultural context for this next quote, by the way, is that the Greeks generally went to communal baths. So this is you're going to be going to a bathhouse that is, sexed. I'm not going to say gendered, because we don't know what the Greek gender identities look like. But you're going to a bath that's sexed with other people. So if you're going to bathe, picture yourself with things that are usually happen in the bath. Some people splash water, some push, some use abusive language, others steal. Therefore, thus you will more softly go about this action if you say to yourself, I will now go bathe, I will keep my own mind in a state comfortable to nature. And in the same manner with regard to every other action. For thus, if any hindrance arises in bathing, you will have it ready to say, it was not only to bathe that I desired, but to keep my mind in a state of comfortable to nature, so that I will not keep it if I am bothered by things that happen. So, there's kind of two sides to this, right? When you come back to hustle culture really likes Stoicism. Because Stoicism basically tells you, effectively, you create your own reality with your thoughts to some degree. Not in the sense of The Secret, but your experience of your own reality is entirely determined by your thoughts. Oh, another $5 super chat from Makeda Hakubi. Again, that my chat is updating sporadically. If I've missed yours, please tag me in Discord. Let me know. You have said before you are a Stoic, not a humanist. At some point, could you cover the differences? Again, I know nothing about either position. Part of the reason I say I'm not a humanist is that humanism is secular in nature, and I am religious. And my religion does affect the way that I view the world, but not negatively.
Which, by the way, I should also clarify one thing about that. Your thoughts do actually affect the world around you, how you see the world around you. That is, they do form a reality in terms of a mental representation.
Correct. And that affects your actions and your ability to interact with that world. And again, I'm not saying this in terms of The Secret, like, oh, you think bad thoughts and that creates your misery. However, if you think a bunch of negative thoughts, you are less likely to take the positive actions that are going to change your reality.
I think a great example of this is imagine that you see your wife in bed with another person whom you do not know. Now, in our cultural context, we would take that as cheating, which would bring on a bunch of negative emotions and thoughts and probably rage. In another cultural context, though, in which this kind of stuff is like normal and people are like, whatever.
Or even just use my house as an example. If my husband walks in on me and my other partner, he's not going to respond that way because he has a very different cultural paradigm.
Right. So
we're in a consensual poly relationship. So it is absolutely within the bounds of our relationship for me to be in bed with my other partner.
Right. And so basically in that way, yes, your cultural framework or your structure, your mental representation of reality does actually affect your emotions. So, yeah. That I think is more the sense of what the Stoics, unlike The Secret, to where if you just imagine you'll get $1 million, you'll get $1 million.
And there's actually mixed research on that. I'm going to do an entire video on why The Secret is so fucking dangerous. And actually, The Secret even stole that stuff from Shakti-Gawain's creative visualization. I'm going to do an entire video on why that is actually a form of orthodoxy that is technically harmful.
Yeah.
But
later near you soon.
So coming back to hustle culture, as Kaleidoscope wonderfully said, and apparently Streamyard and YouTube decided to finally let me see, hustle culture is all about desire. Hustle culture is all about working your ass off to get things theoretically in the future. Generally wealth and some kind of comfort or stability. Usually a lot of hustle culture gurus, the better ones, will tell you to figure out what your minimum standard of living is going to be in terms of your goals. Like, this is what I need to feel comfortable as a human. And they'll tell you, well, like, some people need a yacht in order to feel comfortable. And some people are fine with just owning a house and, like, having a nest egg that's large enough that if an emergency breaks, then they can take care of it. The thing is, the Stoicism tells you don't need either of those things. That as long as you've got like a rock to hide under and a sleeping bag and you're still breathing, you're probably fine. And that's something that like the furthest end of Stoicism will teach you, is that ultimately you don't have a control over whether or not your house that you just bought burns down and you can find another job, right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't take actions to try to find another job. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take actions to try to stop your house from burning. It is simply not within your control what the outcome of any action is. Mm-hmm. And this is where hustle culture is fundamentally opposed to the base principles of Stoicism. Because hustle culture states that if you keep throwing yourself at that same brick wall, you're going to be able to change it. Right? So let me go ahead. Calon, are you familiar with some of the ways that hustle culture has perverted Stoicism? Because this is one of my big bugaboos. This is part of the reason that like people think that fucking Stoicism is for people who want to work themselves to death and feel absolutely nothing while they do it. I'm 3 glasses into the wine, by the way, guys.
When I pretty much looked at hustle culture myself, I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, so this is just capitalists grinding workers to dust in the machine.
But this isn't even just workers, right? Like, this is the petite bourgeoisie. For those of you who are not familiar with lefty terminology, the petite bourgeoisie are those of us who own small businesses. I count as this, technically, with my channel. The petite bourgeoisie are those of us who have more in common with the average worker because we're not stable. We don't own massive amounts of, like, money and wealth and other things. We have to work ourselves to death owning our own small business. That kind of thing. The hustle culture appeals to those folks and tells them you can become the best of the best. And it tells them that if you work yourself to death and ignore your physical needs, and this is part of where Stoicism becomes dangerous when you misunderstand it. because later when you get into the Enchiridion, it talks about doing your best in accordance with your nature. In other words, when I talked about having anxiety problems and having ADHD, it is not within my nature to ever be perfectly diligent or consistent. I'm physically incapable of it.
No, you're not incapable. You are perfectly. You release a video like every freaking week.
I missed this week.
Yeah, and how many weeks before that were you consistent?
6, I think, because I missed one other week. Oh, wait, no, I actually got that one out by Saturday that week. But anyway.
See? My point is proven.
I'm not perfectly consistent, though. I missed a week because I got sick, because that was outside of my control. My hormones and ovaries deciding to absolutely screw me over as hard as they possibly could was completely outside of my control. But part of the reason why I need to bring up politics to talk about hustle culture, and why this has to be brought up when you're talking about Stoicism, is that hustle culture takes an image of Stoicism. This idea that you should work come hell or high water. If you are sick and you are not completely bedbound to the point where you are too weak to get up, you should keep working. And you should use Stoicism as a reminder that you don't need to be in bed. You don't need that penicillin. You should get up and keep working.
But what if I like that bed and it's nice and warm?
Part of the reason why there's also the Stoic principle of, being the best that you can within accordance to your nature, which he generally talked about because social castes work differently in Greece. A farmer being the best farmer that they could be and trying to give the best crop yields that they could in accordance with reason and their physical capability. A merchant selling the best that they could. That's what they meant by in accordance with your nature. However, in the modern day, we understand that, and this is not eugenics. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things like genetic disorders, ADHD, anxiety, etc. Some of us are going to be better at being consistent than others. That's just a fact.
No, look how consistent Allie is.
But part of that is circumstances, right? I don't have control over the fact that I have the circumstances that I do in my life that allow me to mostly be consistent for the most part, with the exception of being sick, right? I cannot gift you additional partners that help support you. I have 2 partners that work their asses off and help support me. And that's part of the reason why, with the exception of when I have financial emergencies, I can focus my energy on this channel and on my fiction work. And that's what I can do. That's part of the reason why I don't stress monetary anything on this channel. On very rare occasion, I talk about my financial situation because when things get really dire, that's a conversation that I can have. And I can be forward with, hey, I might take some of your Patreon money and use this for my bills, right? Uh-huh. But I can't control the fact that you don't have 2 partners that can help provide for you. That means that I have, due to circumstances, the ability to be more consistent than you do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, say, my brain is wired to be perfectly consistent, whereas somebody who's a little more neurotypical might have much more of that ability than I do if they were in the same circumstances. There's an entire set of additional considerations that hustle culture utterly ignores, that Stoicism does not.
Hustle culture is basically salaryman culture. Do you know what that term means, Allie?
Well, yeah, basically work yourself to death regardless of how much you're being paid and hope they pay you more.
Yeah, it's a thing in Japan.
Yeah. And the thing is you better earn that freaking salary. But hustle culture is even worse because hustle culture often is you don't even have a salary, right? Hustle culture is usually go out and start your own business and work yourself to freaking death. But that's completely incompatible with Stoicism. Because Stoicism states that you don't need to go out and work yourself to death.
Stoicism would rather that you find a nice good log, have a good blanket, and go to sleep under that log.
Well, yeah, and actually, Duver Delane, and again, let me know, Duver, if I'm mispronouncing your name. I do not, I know that that's Celtic, and I don't speak any of those languages. I'm so sorry. But Duver Dulian, how can you combine capitalism, which always tries to push more desires on you, with Stoicism? Working yourself to death won't make you happy. Well, that's the thing. Stoicism, much like Buddhism, is completely incompatible with capitalism. Capitalism needs endless desire in order to generate wealth and income, which income is different than wealth, and we can talk about that in a future video that's a little more, like political minded. But when you're talking about hustle culture, you can't not get political. I'm sorry for those of you who just wanted to talk philosophy. Philosophy interacts with real life, and that's actually another principle of Stoicism. Philosophy is not something that you idly read. Philosophy is lived. And that's something that Epictetus actually does say in one of the sections of the Enchiridion, right? Philosophy is not, if you could just sit around and read Chrysippus, which was his teacher, his predecessor, if you could sit around and read his works and have a happier life, then everyone would be doing that. But instead, you actually kind of have to live it. And that's what I'm talking about when I start talking politics. Unfortunately, to some degree, you have to talk about politics when you're talking about Stoicism and hustle culture. So, kind of coming back to why hustle culture is actually incompatible with Stoicism, there's this idea that if you can't do more, you must not be trying hard enough, which is completely fucking wrong. Most of the time, by the way. There's an element almost of perfectionism that a lot of hustle culture people will try to lampshade with Stoicism. They'll try to be like, well, if you're not doing your absolute best, then you must be the best judge of that. Which, again, we went over the whole anxiety thing. We are not the best judges of our own capability. We're not. We never will be. But there's this idea that you are. Because, well, you can control what you think, right? So you can apply reason to figure out whether or not you could have been perfect. Which, again, is incompatible with one of the other principles of Stoicism, which is basically if something happened in the past, it's unchangeable, right? Which, again, Calon loves to remind me when I get into my moods.
Oh, wait, if something happens in the past, it's unchangeable?
Yeah, if something happened in the past, clearly you did the best you could, or you would have done something differently. With the circumstances at the time, you applied the best reason you could at that time. The most you can do is take a lesson into the future. That's one of the things that, you learn as a Stoic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this idea specifically within this hustle culture Stoic sort of paradigm, which again, I completely disagree that the hustle culture version of Stoicism is Stoicism. It's not.
It's like Western Buddhism.
Ping, we will get into in a future stream. The in general VC, Ping asks if Zeus is the only sage. What about the other deities? We will get into the Stoic sort of Gaia theory in future streams. The theological view of Stoicism, I do not actually fully hold, but it is essential to understanding where a lot of these conclusions came from. The Stoics basically believed that all of the universe, in our modern day terms, atom in the universe was part of Zeus's mind. Effectively. So again, like an extreme version of Gaia theory. So the other gods are not, is the answer.
Or if they are, they're just a reflection of Zeus. Yeah,
they're a reflection of Zeus's mind. So again, I disagree theologically with the Stoics because most of the philosophical branches had theological components to them. But I disagree with the Stoic, specifically theology, though it does inform some of my thoughts on things.
And I disagree with it all, so we're all good.
Marrow in the chat, because it just refreshed, said that's more of a way to deal with burnout victims, OGF hustle culture. So coming back to kind of the grind of hustle culture, kind of this idea of Stoicism and the way it's manipulated, is there's this idea that you should be impervious to the pain of the grind, which Tequid in Xanos chat says, I like the perspective of the grind of hustle culture. Of course, what makes them hustlers is that they sell a picture of a hard worker that they themselves don't do since they're grifters. Well, some of them are workaholics, I guess, and they have that sort of hypomania, which is useful in capitalism. The thing is there actually are some gurus that do work themselves to death that way. But when I talk about hustle culture, I'm talking about the people who fall for it and who break themselves. And the issue with the people who break themselves and with trying to use Stoicism to do it is that Stoicism actually advocates for a measure of constraint, which hustle culture completely ignores. Hustle culture tells you if you think you've got more energy, then you should keep going. Whereas Stoicism states, understand what you are capable of now and strive to improve it bit by bit within the capabilities of your own nature. If you are born 5'0", you are probably not going to become a basketball star. You can try to get better at basketball and enjoy it as a sport, but you're probably never going to get picked up by an NBA team. Understanding that is important, right? And again, I'm not arguing for eugenics here at all. There's no like race theory and IQ going on there. Like this is literally just an objective physical fact of reality and what somebody might be suited to.
It's not even a technical physical fact of quote reality. It's more a thing of capitalism.
Well, it's an objective physical fact of the material reality we currently live in.
Well, no, as in capitalism is the one who says, oh, if you're 5 foot, you're not fit to be on our team because we demand that our players be X amount of height, rather than accommodating the sport to people who are below that height, if that makes sense.
Well, correct. And although you can work to try to reform the world so that, you know, you're not living in a capitalist country anymore that's going to tell you no, ultimately you have to accept to some degree that this is currently the reality that you live in and temper your expectations accordingly. And that's part of Stoicism. If you wrap your entire, like, happiness into this idea that you're going to become an NBA star and you're 5'0", you're going to be in for disappointment. Yep. But hustle culture would tell you it doesn't matter that you're 5'0". Use Stoicism to ignore the pain that you have while you're chasing that dream because you can fucking get there. It doesn't matter how outlandish that dream is. If you work hard enough, you'll get there. It's buying fully into this idea of exceptionalism, this idea of endless possibility, almost The Secret but worse. And trying to use this principle of, well, the world is only how you see it, so ignore your pain. Ignore the discomfort, ignore your physical limitations, ignore your own capabilities.
Yup.
And this is why I absolutely hate the hustle culture version of Stoicism. Because the hustle culture version of Stoicism will go so far as to even co-opt some of the most horrific events in history. One of the books that I read early on, because I fell for hustle culture for quite a while. This is something that I don't talk about too much on my channel. But at one point, I actually did fall for one of these sort of gurus. And it's not exactly the best memory for me. But early on in my writing career, part of the reason I got as much success as I did was because I pushed myself beyond what I thought my limits were. I purchased one of those fake gurus as a mentor of a sort. That's what he called himself. He was the life coach is what you'd actually call him. But I followed all of those like hustle culture podcasts. That's how I discovered a lot of what the real Stoicism was I started reading a lot of the thinkers that were referenced by the hustle culture Stoics. And I pushed myself as an author into higher and higher levels of productivity and held myself to worse and worse standards to the point where I beat myself to hell and back when I could not accomplish what I had set out for day in and day out, because these goals that I had set for myself would not be possible in the timeframes that were set if I didn't accomplish them. Right? Like this is how I fell into this. And the more I studied the ancient Stoics, the more I realized how incompatible with that worldview Stoicism actually is. Because Stoicism states there is so much you as a human can do by your very nature. Now, again, we have a wider understanding in the modern day. Somebody who's prone to anxiety, somebody with ADHD, somebody with, you know, a limiting physical or mental or genetic factor might not be able to accomplish quite as much as somebody who doesn't have that. We understand that now. We also understand more about ways to cope with those things. But again, no matter how well I cope with my ADHD, I'm still going to have an introspate nervous system. Ikeda, $5 super chat that finally came in. Thank you so much. Use this to raise your spirits. Thank you so much. So coming back to kind of my experience with this guru, and coming back to kind of my experience with
by the way, a lot of these gurus, they call themselves gurus, but that's really an appropriation of the term.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, nah, you're not guru. For those who understand Hinduism will get more of what I mean.
And JB Bell calls it like $ stoicism fundamentally gets what success is wrong. And that is true. $ stoicism or hustle culture stoicism puts success as external. You set them, mind you, but it sets it as external sort of goals as success rather than sort of the internal joy that you feel when you're.
It's purely materialistic.
Yeah. Which, when you understand proper stoicism, you understand that the process itself, I might not get any material benefit apart from maybe something nice to wear out of the project that I'm currently knitting, but the process of making it is relaxing and I enjoy that. So even if I was making a pair of socks that I will never receive material benefit for, that I might go send off to a friend, the process of making them was enjoyable. The process of writing was enjoyable. But coming back to my example with this fake guru, I set these productivity standards for myself that were far beyond what I was capable of maintaining for the long term, and ended up burning myself out fairly badly right before I got sick, before I came into this community. Because of hustle culture stoicism teaching me to ignore all of the red flags in my head about what I was capable of, about how stressful this was, about how little joy I was receiving, this idea that there was joy just on the horizon for me. That once I got there, once I got success, once this, that, or the other number of stories was published, once, I started making money on that book, once I got all these stability things, all these external factors, that is polar opposite to what we just discussed about don't shackle yourself to desire and aversion. And yet, they have taken and grasped onto that first principle about creating your physical reality effectively, or at least your personal representation of it, from what you think, from your narratives.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there is a genuine danger in that concept being hijacked to hurt people.
Well, it's not just that. It's also when they start saying, this little thing you call empathy and whatnot. Don't let your feelings get in the way. Go ahead, bulldoze down that forest. It's okay. That kind of nonsense. And, yeah, leads to a lot of, well, it leads to, nightmare. It leads to a hellscape, basically. It's like, for me, I'm going to Kerr. I don't need to rush my way there.
Well, and sort of coming back to my example that I just gave of my personal experience, at least with hustle culture stoicism, part of the issue with getting there, and I did actually get there, I wrote a book and published it in under 4 months. Right? I actually stuck to a lot of those unrealistic standards long enough to publish, and I thought that I could keep going because I thought, well, maybe if I get financially independent on this, to the point where we can, say, pay our house off early and go to Greece and all these other things that I fantasized about doing, well, then I'll be happy. But I'm not happy along the way. And the difference, I think, in what Stoicism teaches versus hustle culture is that I don't need to get to the point where I'm financially independent to be healthy, to be happy, under Stoic principle, properly. In fact, I don't feel the drive to accomplish those overwhelming level of productivity in the first place. Because why would you?
Exactly. Yeah, because ultimately it just sacrifices your own health and puts you into a worse mental space, which you can then not control once you're in said mental space, right, Allie?
Mm-hmm.
And that loss of control, well, that's something you want to avoid. And that's something the Stoics like to avoid, too.
And, part of, and yes, Ikeda Hakubi in General VC text asked me, was that Covenant? You did a great job. Yes, that is, the name of the book is Covenant of the Hollow. If you want to go look it up, the author name that I write under is Ashley Gouch. It's a pseudonym that I write under. Covenant of the Hollow is the first in that series. The second one is most of the way done, and then I got celiac and sick, and then YouTube took over my life. I'm working on actually getting that cleaned up enough to send it to my editor so I can get that one published sometime next year. My hope is to get it out by June, but that's not a promise. But coming back to kind of getting Covenant out, I put myself through hell to do it. I really did. And the issue with having put myself through hell to do it is I could have stopped and really enjoyed the process the way that I have with Prisoner of the Hollow, which is the one I'm working on now. But instead, I fell into this belief that I could force myself to ignore all of those feelings, what I was capable of, during that process. And I robbed myself of a great deal of joy in the moment, in the hopes that I could basically chase financial stability through writing. And again, you don't have to be anti-capitalism to recognize that this is a fucking issue, right?
Yeah, ideally, even within a capitalist system, you want workers who enjoy their work are way more productive than workers who absolutely despise it.
Well, and here's the other problem, though, with that, is it's not even just whether or not you enjoy your work. It's whether or not you're applying some standard to yourself that is not appropriate for what you're capable of. It's about being realistic. And realistic does not mean, completely undershooting what you're capable of. But one of the things that I've had to learn through Stoicism is that you've got good days and bad days, right? But you're not in control of whether or not you've got a good day or a bad day when it comes to, say, I've got chronic health conditions. People know this about me. And one of the parts of accepting reason is that if you're going to set standards for yourself, you need to set standards for what you're capable of on your bad days, so that you can surprise yourself on your good ones. Because if you try to set your standards on your good days, so to speak, then you're not acting in accordance with your nature, because your nature, given that you've got this chronic health condition that might interfere, your nature is that which is the lowest amount of output that you can possibly give. Again, talking completely capitalistic terms here. Casinos says, what did I say that book was? Which book are you talking about? Oh, my novel? Here, I will type it in Casinos chat for you, for those of you that are in my Discord. It's Covenant of the Hollow by Ashley Gouch is my novel. The book that we've been talking about for the course of the stream is the Enchiridion by Epictetus.
Epictetus.
So sorry for those of you who had to hear me type. My microphone is notoriously sensitive, but I'm doing my best not to bug you guys too much with that, and to type with my mic muted when Calon is off about something.
Huh? What did I do?
For those of you who are concerned about my accent, it doesn't show up on my live streams all that often. I'm tipsy, just a bit. I've drank about a half a bottle of wine so far, because...
Yeah, you need to drink more. Get her to drink more, guys.
I spent the first between 5 and 6 years of my life in Britain. This is how I naturally talk. I put on an American accent because after that, my mum, got custody of me again. And after that, I sort of learned how to mask my accent. So if you've never heard me speak like this on the channel, don't fret. It's actually on purpose. I do my best not to talk like this around people, but this is my natural speaking voice when I'm actually relaxed. My friends get to hear it when I'm particularly happy. I've been told by a particular friend that it sort of floats out if I get rather passionate about something, or if I get particularly angry. So this is what I sound like. It's a bizarre mix of South London and Sheffield and American and Haida. It's sort of all of those things flooded together, but this is how I naturally talk most of the time. If I relax completely and there's no anxiety and I've got no presentation to the world, this is what I sound like. So
kill. Mm-hmm.
Hadakil.
This is now a Haida stream. Okay.
Calon has been learning Haida, and I've been having to correct her pronunciation. It's been interesting. So that's...
My grammar at least is decent.
So part of the reason why these are wine streams is because my Discord in particular seems to love bribing me with cash to buy wine so they can hear it. Because unless I'm drunk or really angry, you don't get to hear it all that often because I'm anxious pretty much all the time.
Or
and that's my
if
secret.
you just keep speaking to Ali and Haida, she eventually, her English self breaks, and you just get these broken sentences intermixed with Haida structures, which is fun.
Keeping up with that, Marrowcat, I don't know how long ago this went, but it says, keeping up with that research is discipline, though. Let's have a conversation one of these days about ADHD and hyperfocus. That is the opposite, actually, of disciplined. That is actually my disorder completely running off with my brain and me just happening to work in a field where that's acceptable. I just so happen to be a YouTuber, which means that I can spend days obsessively talking about the same topic or researching it, and I get to make a video, and then I get to happen to make a little bit of money off my patrons, and those of you who decide to donate and whatever smidgen of ad revenue that YouTube throws my way. But I happen to get a mild reward for it, but most of us don't get that. Most of us, you get hyper-focused, say, on a video game or something, that's not profitable. You just get accused of attacking yourself.
Oh, that.
Right? You just get accused of being lazy, I suppose is the word that I was looking for. Victor Conway says, I think you have a lovely accent, $5. Well, thank you so much for tossing a donation my way to let me know that. You're wonderful, and I appreciate it. I'm a bit embarrassed of my accent, honestly. I've been told it sounds very fake because it's a mix of different things, but it is my natural way of speaking. It doesn't vary too much.
Well, there is one way you can more naturally speak, though.
So we have a question. I'm not going to get too much because this is supposed to be a Stoicism stream, but I'm going to talk very briefly. Somebody asked me in Tequid, looks like, or no, Sam, what are the different types of ADHD? There are 3. Primarily hyperactive. That's your stereotypical, the boy in the back of the class who's probably throwing spitballs at the teacher and is being overly excited. Then you've got primarily inattentive, and that is his sister who's probably staring out the window, bored off her mind, thinking about all of the different fantastic things and not paying attention to the teacher. And then you have combined, which is some horrendous combination of the two, and that's what I've got. So I've talked extensively about ADHD in other streams in the past. I highly suggest checking out both my interview on Christy Abbey's channel and the Christy Abbey Xenia Bridge, which was before it got renamed to the Coalition. Both of those, I talk extensively about my experience with having ADHD. And if you guys really want to talk about ADHD and mental health specifically, let me know in the comments after the stream. That includes you that are here live. Let me know in the comments after the stream. And I will do a solo stream where I talk about my experience with having ADHD, because I'm very much an ADHD advocate, and a lot of people misunderstand the disorder. It's more of a intraspaced nervous system than it is like the inability to focus at all. I actually lose the ability not to focus on things that I'm overly interested in, and it is just as much of a problem. And it's just as compulsive as the not being able to do things I should be doing. So if you guys want to hear about that, let me know in the comments, and I will schedule that for a Saturday for one of these sort of random rants.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But what were we talking? Oh, yeah, Stoicism. So,
yeah, we've got a half an hour left for a typical stream rate sort of length.
So, what is the Stoicist philosophy on numbers?
Oh, God. I don't necessarily think... I don't know, actually, if they had talked too much about numbers. Now, I don't think they thought they were literally real until later when they started agreeing with Platonists on things. Which reminds me, the Stoics and the Platonists, actually, for the first half of their existence, did not like each other at all.
No, they loved each other, I thought. I thought they were, like, just making out in the grassy fields of Greece.
Oh, what? No. So there were... Plato and Zeno of Citium were very much opposed to each other in philosophy. It wasn't until significantly later when the Christians and certain Jewish philosophers at the time started attacking Hellenism that they started to agree with each other at all.
Those Christians, the great unifiers.
But coming, sort of talking about like Stoicism and Platonism, the Stoics were very concerned about actions, and the Platonists were much more concerned about theology. Like, there was a lot of theological thought within Stoicism, but there was a lot more concern of ethics. And eventually, like, the Platonists kind of started picking up Stoic ethics, and eventually the Stoics sort of picked up bits and pieces, especially later Stoics. I'm trying to remember. Chrysippus was one of the earlier ones, but I have one that's fragments of another Stoic that I've been reading through, and I can't remember his name because I'm tipsy, which is horrendous and probably not the best thing. But some of the later Stoics, which, Seneca is one of the more famous ones. Marcus Aurelius, who I have issues with a lot of people who read Marcus Aurelius and think he's sort of the be-all, end-all of Stoicism because he's so readable. Marcus Aurelius published a journal. Epictetus was a teacher. If you're going to start with Stoicism, start with Epictetus. Like, Marcus Aurelius is not bad, but he's not the whole of Stoicism in much the same way that a lot of people think. But when you talk about Platonism and Stoicism, Platonism started picking up Stoic ethics, and Stoicism started picking up Platonist theology a bit, but they were very much opposed for a long time. In fact, if you read Cicero's on the nature of the gods, he actually talks a lot about the way that the two would feud.
De natura deorum. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we all know that Marcus Aurelius was the best Stoic ever. And Ali agrees with everything Marcus Aurelius ever.
That's what I think about that. Anyway.
One of these days, the glory of Marcus Aurelius will shine through Ali's eyes.
So for those of you who are watching it live and not podcasting, I kicked Calon into the back room there for a moment as part of the joke, because explaining it makes it so much more funny. But coming back to, I guess, Stoicism and my issues with it and hustle culture, and part of the reason why I wanted to do this stream to explain it is I've seen a number of other YouTubers, and I'm not going to call anyone out in particular because, number one, I just don't need that sort of drama, right? Like, if I'm calling somebody out, it's because they're a fucking predator, usually, not because I've just got an issue with their philosophy. But I will say that I've seen other YouTubers, particularly hustle culture YouTubers, but even within the atheist sphere or the pagan sphere.
Atheist? What's an atheist?
Yeah, well, I know we're allied with them, aren't we? You should know what one is.
Wait, what? There are people who don't believe in the gods?
Heracles. Heracles was the Stoic that I was referring to. Thank you, Heracles. Heracles posted a list of later Stoics in my Discord, and Heracles was the latest Stoic that I have the Book of Fragments of that I've been studying. $5 super chat from Kaleidoscope. Hyperfocus, all the focus, none of the convenience of choosing what your brain hyperfocuses on. Absolutely that. Absolutely that. When I talk about, if you guys, again, I highly recommend comments, not just in my Discord, but comment section of this video. Let me know if you want an ADHD stream. I will absolutely talk about it at length and talk you guys' ear completely off, because my experience with ADHD, the story of my diagnosis, and coming to kind of where I can cope with it now to the point where I'm actually productive because I'm also working in an industry I get to hyperfocus on, and the sort of balance of I don't know what the line between work and life is, all of that I will go into extraordinary levels of detail if you guys really want to hear about it, because I am an ADHD advocate and I absolutely will talk about my experiences. Ikeda also gave us a $5 super chat. This is for Calon on the Platonism rant. Did you say that gods are real but numbers aren't?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did. Yeah. I did, because I am a mathematical formalist. For those who don't know, I actually have quite a bit of training in mathematics. And, like, as in, I was on my way to getting an undergrad degree in mathematics. So I've gone all the way up through, like, differential equations and whatnot. And generally the problem is that even if for mathematical Platonists, there gets to be a certain point in mathematics to where even if you are a mathematical Platonist, you tend to use some sort of methodological formalism, because otherwise things just become a lot more limited in terms of thought, unless you just treat them as a bunch of symbols and whatnot. So yes.
I mean, when we do our Platonism 2 Electric Boogaloo, which we haven't announced yet, but we do that stream eventually, which I pseudo-announced in my Discord. I hinted that after I do the... I've got in the works, I've posted for my patrons the next 5 videos or so that I'm going to be working on. But I've got in the works in the next couple of months, both a YSCE takedown, which I've announced in a different server, and another video on Platonism in the New Testament. And when I do that video, that month, we will do a Platonism 2 Electric Boogaloo type stream where we talk about Platonism, its influence on Christianity, and where a lot of modern version of Platonism, like, sort of get their ideas from. We'll also go a little bit more in depth into concepts that you guys were having a little bit of a harder time with after the last stream. Hopefully, the bloody chat will work so I can actually respond to you guys properly instead of trying to keep up with 2 different chats and maybe sometimes occasionally get super chats through that I can actually read.
Platonism is easy, though. It's just about all the unity that is totally not unity, but still is unity through some sort of means of unity. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. See, that's Platonism.
Effectively. So, coming back to Stoicism, though, Stoicism has become... There are some modern Stoics that exist. Like, it's not just the ancient practice of Stoicism. There are actually a few modern Stoics that still write and still create philosophy. But at its core, if you read Epictetus and you read, let's say you try to pick up some of the fragments of Chrysippus, which we don't have any of his writing surviving, but we have a lot of people who talk about him. And some scholars have collected all the people who've talked about him in the same way that they have with Heracles. And again, that's Hierocles, Heracles. Not to be confused with Heracles, which is the one I just did the video on, last week. They've collected all of the different fragments where he's referenced and kind of tried to reconstruct his philosophy. That's kind of advanced material for an aspiring Stoic. But for those of you who want to get started, I highly recommend the works of Seneca, 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 and Epictetus, Epictetus, especially the Enchiridion, which I linked in the live chat and in Discord. I'm going to put the link. This is a bad translation of the Enchiridion, which I recommend finding either the Leb translation if you can get it, or there's another one. I'll have to go looking through my library and put a link to the Amazon link for it in the description of the video later, probably tomorrow when I'm not tipsy. But there's an excellent translation that actually has some fantastic translation notes that I've got on my Kindle that's significantly cheaper than the Leb version. It does not give you access to the Greek, but if you don't know Greek, that's not as useful anyway. But it does have some excellent translation notes to sort of talk a bit about it. So, I highly recommend as a beginning Stoic that those are the places that you start. Marcus Aurelius he published a journal that was sort of him with his
It wasn't
teacher.
really even a journal. It was more like a bunch of notes he took.
Yeah, and it was never intended for other people's eyes, and it sort of became famous because somebody published it.
There's still some good stuff in his notes, but still.
Oh yeah, there's some excellent stuff in there.
It's kind of like Aristotle in that way, except he was doing it to himself rather than his students just copying down what he said.
Pretty much. Whereas the Enchiridion is actually like notes that a student took of Epictetus, who was actually a teacher. So if you want to learn, this is literally how it was explained to the ancient students as the school was sort of forming on the Stoa.
Yeah. So. Yep.
So as far as wrapping up, as far as sort of talking about, because I talked about
Wait, no, you're not drunk enough.
I'm not going to get giggly drunk this time. I don't have enough money to buy 2 bottles of wine.
Hey,
and I've got a bit too much
send,
alcohol resistance.
Hey, everyone send her money so she can get
That
drunk.
does not mean send more money, you, like, gods. Calon, don't shill for me.
I'll shill for whoever I want to shill.
Speaking of shilling, actually, I've got a reminder in the bridge to nag you to talk about your channel, which is in the description, and also the fact that you've actually got a bloody wish list up now, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Calon is one of those rare Sumerian recon beings that none of us actually believe exist, but yeah, here she is.
Hi. Yes, I do Sumerian stuff, which is very different from Hellenist stuff. Like, Greeks are weird. That's what I'll say.
The Sumerians are weird.
Greeks are weirder. Like, could you, like, yeah, it's just, like, could you imagine forbidding magic? Ew.
I never said it was forbidden. It just was not necessarily, like, approved of either.
Like, where do
There's
you
a
guys
distinct
get their
difference between the
exorcists
two.
from? Like, don't you guys have exorcists?
Okay, but remember, the particular exorcism that you're talking about came from the Hippocratic school. I talked about that in my video. Do you not keep up with my content, Calon? You're on my channel.
I do run your channel, yes.
I said you're on my channel. I didn't say you run it.
Secret. Hey, everyone, here's the real secret. I actually run Allie's channel. Allie is just the mouthpiece. No.
I will continue to allow you to believe that.
But yeah, I do stuff from Sumer. My primary focus for reconstruction tends to be around Ur and Uruk. The Ur, which may or may not be the Ur from the Bible, depending on which biblical scholar you ask. And Uruk, which is basically the biggest city in the world for a good 1,000 years.
Didn't you just put out a video on theology recently that we can do?
I did, and unlike Stoicism, and unlike either Stoicism or Platonism, my theology is purely animist.
Yeah, to be fair, I have a animist bit to my theology as well, but that's also personal because I'm Haida.
Yeah, mine comes from basically various readings in Sumerian, where basically the Sumerians tended to deify things like crazy, and I mean actual things like drums and whatnot. Things get the Dinger sign all this time. The Dinger sign is like the sign for like a god or something, and they also do the same thing to temples and whatnot, to the point to where it's just like, yeah, no, you guys are animists. It's like, no, that's just no. It's animism is like, to me, the most. It explains the most. It also means that my version of the gods is a lot more flexible than, I guess, what the Greek.
Well, don't give too many things away. If you explain too much on the stream, they don't have to go check out the video, do they?
I mean, there's only so much I can really say within like if you were to give me 2 days straight of just explaining pure Sumerian stuff, then yeah, that probably wouldn't be as much. But anyhow, so yeah, my next video is actually going to be on the goddess Nanshe, who is a goddess of social justice and the sea, who, like Aphrodite, comes from sea foam.
Well, and to know would hope, I know that you said that you stumbled in toward the end of the stream, about 10 minutes ago, but responding to you now that the chat is actually updated again, because again, the tech gremlins have invaded YouTube, and whatever server this stream is being hosted on is utterly fucked, and I apologize that I haven't been able to respond to the live chat as much as I'd like. But Noah, if you are not as familiar with Stoicism, go ahead and start back the stream over when it processes tomorrow. We talk extensively about why the tech bros and such are actually wrong about Stoicism and how it's ultimately kind of the opposite of what a lot of hustle culture is all about.
Yeah.
So, Calon, so where can people find you? Because I've actually got your links in the description for once, because I was actually prepared.
Yeah, people can actually find me at my channel, which is Calon Ushungal, which Ushungal, it gets translated as dragon. It literally just means big snake. The Sumerians were pretty blunt when they named things. Like, it's almost amusing how they name things at times. It's hilarious. You can also find me on Twitter. I also have a specific Sumerian Discord if by any chance someone is interested in doing Sumerian reconstruction as well, because, there aren't a lot of us.
No, but
Really
you also just put together a wish list for your channel, much like I had done for mine, and you are actually a bit more in a financial position where if somebody really wants to donate something to a cause over the holiday season,
oh god,
you'd be a significantly better pick, honestly.
I mean, the thing is that when it comes to Assyriology, you see the same problem within Hellenism as well, where academic stuff is expensive. But in Assyriology, it's probably about 10 times worse.
Oh, no. Well, you've forgotten how much I've had to pay for some of my books.
No. When I mean 10 times worse, I mean as in there's an even smaller subset of scholars, and their work is even harder at times to get because the area has gradually sort of shrunken. I mean, all the classics has shrunken. Let's not play. Let's be frank there. But like Assyriology in that regard has shrunken a little bit more than others from what I've seen.
Child of Nix 13 donates $5. Dollars to use for whatever you like. Thank you so much, Child of Nix. That's actually really appreciative. Thank you so much for the donation. What most likely will happen is eventually when, YouTube pays me next month, because I don't get any of this money until at the end of next month, because that's the way that YouTube works, it will most likely end up either going to medication because of the stuff that I talked about in my last stream on healthcare, or it will end up going to books for the channel, because research is expensive, and that's where most of my channel dollars go.
That's pretty much how you can sum up all of classics. Research is freaking expensive.
Yep, and I don't have access to a college to borrow those books, nor would the college that I have access to locally have all that many, because the UW doesn't exactly have the best classics program. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky with some of the material I'm able to find, but like I said, with my wish list, all of those books are books that are strictly needed for research reasons and whatnot. I actually recently just found a book on Assyrian dream interpretation that I want to find some way to pick up. That'll be cool.
So Ping asks, when will you do the Epicureanism stream? When I have more information available to me on Epicureanism. It's something I'm tangentially familiar with, but as you all know, I will not do a video or a stream until I feel competent enough within my education on that topic to do so. And Stoicism is literally my wheelhouse, so I can do more Stoicism streams endlessly. Platonism requires a bit more research, but Epicureanism is something that I am familiar with somewhat. It's just something that I want to get deeper into and read some more thinkers from that particular philosophy before I get into it. So the answer is it will be probably a few months down the line after I've had a bit more time to acquire resources on it. Expect more things to show up on the wish list if that's something that you guys in general are looking forward to. Kane says, or Kane, I'm not sure which, says, I'm just excited for the Dionysia video. Yeah, I'm going to be doing a video on Dionysia. It will be City Dionysia, not Ruler of Dionysia. My patron bonus video topic that was requested was on the Dionysia. So I'm going to be doing one on the, again, Athenian City Dionysia. Eventually, there will be a future one on the rural Dionysia as well, but the city Dionysia is the one that I have the most resources on currently, so I feel confident enough with what I've got available to do one.
Yep.
When I said UW, I said yes. UW as in University of Washington. Yes.
Yeah, classics programs across the country are really suffering.
So, with that, I think I'm going to wrap up the Stoicism stream. I hope that I was able to give...
Wait, you're not drunk enough.
At the very least, a decent enough overview on the beginnings of the topic. If you guys would like another Stoicism stream, Calon and I have talked about doing sort of wine rant type hangout streams at least once a month going forward, if Calon's university schedule continues to be open enough for that. So... I'm going to do my best to do that every month, and Calon and I have agreed to it. So expect more Wine Rant streams. When there's enough of them, there will probably be a playlist as well for those of you who really want to listen to me for hours on end for some godforsaken reason. Let me know in the comments if you guys have more questions or a particular topic within Stoicism that you're familiar with that you'd like me to cover a bit more. We'll probably go through the Enchiridion section by section. We only got through 4 of them tonight because I had a lot of gripes, bones to pick, so to speak, with... a lot of people who like to hijack Stoicism for nefarious purposes. So you'll probably get a bit more of that in next one, because again, nearly everything that the so-called tech bros, as Noah put it, or the hustle culture, as I would, says about Stoicism is basically just a manipulative bit of propaganda to try to get you to hurt yourself. And as you guys know, if you've watched my anti-theism video, or pretty much any of my content, I'm thoroughly anti-harm. If you are actively using your beliefs to harm yourself, you're using them for the wrong reason, and those beliefs are probably not helpful to you. Mm-hmm. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for a bit. It was thoroughly enjoyable, and as I said, I'm a bit on the tipsy side. I went through half a bottle of wine, which is what I had available to me.
We need to get out to finish the wine off.
I hope you guys got to enjoy yourselves as much as Calon and I did, as painful as it is for her to be stuck with me on a Saturday.
It's not painful.
It's painful.
It's painful for you, not for me.
Oh, God forbid. You're one of my friends. Of course I want to hang out with you on a Saturday. It's just terrible to be stuck with me. Tipsy Aleakai is not fun to deal with.
Well, I mean, she is when I just start speaking in Haida to her, and she doesn't know how to format sentences anymore.
Oh my God, don't you dare. Have a good night, everyone. And remember, we're stronger together.